The Nobel Peace Prize for 2025 goes to a brave and committed champion of peace, to a woman who keeps the flame of democracy burning amidst a growing darkness. The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize for 2025 to Maria Corina Machado. She is receiving the Nobel Peace Prize for her tireless work promoting democratic rights for the people of Venezuela and for her struggle to achieve a just and peaceful transition from dictatorship to democracy. As the leader of the democratic forces in Venezuela, Maria Corina Machado is one of the most extraordinary examples of civilian courage in Latin America in recent times. Ms. Machado has been a key unifying figure in a political opposition that was once deeply divided, an opposition that found common ground in the demand for free election and representative government. This is precisely what lies at the heart of democracy, our shared willingness to defend the principles of popular rule, even though we disagree. At a time when democracy is under threat, it is more important than ever to defend this common ground. Venezuela has evolved from a relatively democratic and prosperous country to a brutal and authoritarian state that is now suffering a humanitarian and economic crisis. Most Venezuelans live in deep poverty, even as the few at the top enrich themselves. The violent machinery of the state is directed against its own population. Nearly 8 million people have left the country. The opposition has been systematically suppressed by means of election rigging, legal prosecution, and imprisonment. Venezuela's authoritarian regime makes political work extremely dangerous. As the founder of Sumate, an organization devoted to democratic development, Ms. Machado stood up for free and fair elections more than 20 years ago. As she said, it was a choice of ballots over bullets. In political office and in her service to organizations since then, Ms. Machado has spoken out for judicial independence, human rights, and popular representation. She has spent years working for the freedom of the Venezuelan people. Ahead of the election of 2024, Ms. Machado was the opposition's presidential candidate, but the regime blocked her candidacy. She then backed the representative of a different party, Edmundo González Urrutia, in the election. Hundreds of thousands of volunteers mobilized across political divides. They were trained as election observers to ensure a transparent and fair election. Despite the risk of harassment, arrest, and torture, citizens across the country held watch over the polling stations. They made sure the final tallies were documented before the regime could destroy ballots and lie about the outcome. The efforts of the collective opposition, both before and during the election, were innovative and brave, peaceful and democratic. The opposition received international support when its leaders publicized the vote counts that had been collected from the country's election districts, showing that the opposition had won by a clear margin. But the regime refused to accept the election result and clung to power. Democracy is a precondition for lasting peace. However, we live in a world where democracy is in retreat, where more and more authoritarian regimes are challenging norms and resorting to violence. The Venezuelan regime's rigid hold on power and its repression of its population are not unique in the world. We see the same trends globally. Rule of law abused by those in control, free media silenced, critics imprisoned, and societies pushed towards authoritarian rule and militarization. In 2024, more elections were held than ever before, but fewer and fewer are free and fair. In its long history, the Norwegian Nobel Committee has honored brave women and men who have stood up to repression, who have carried the hope of freedom in prison cells, on the streets, and in public squares, and who have shown by their actions that peaceful resistance can change the world. In the past year, Ms. Machado has been forced to live in hiding. Despite serious threats against her life, she has remained in the country, a choice that has inspired millions. When authoritarians seize power, it is crucial to recognize courageous defenders of freedom who rise and resist. Democracy depends on people who refuse to stay silent, who dare to step forward despite grave risk, and who remind us that freedom must never be taken for granted, but must always be defended, with words, with courage, and with determination. Maria Corina Machado meets all the three criteria stated in Alfred Nobel's will for the selection of a Peace Prize. She has brought her country's opposition together. She has never wavered in resisting the militarization of Venezuelan society. She has been steadfast in her support for a peaceful transition to democracy. Maria Corina Machado has shown that the tools of democracy are also the tools of peace. She embodies the hope of a different future, one where the fundamental rights of citizens are protected and their voices are heard. In this future, people will finally be free to live in peace. Thank you. Questions?
Mr. Chair, the attention this year has been a bit further north.
All right. The Nobel Peace Prize winner, Maria Corina Machado from Venezuela, Latin America. We do want to go now live to our Selma Abdelaziz, who is in London, here to give us a little bit more context of maybe why this is the recipient this year and what the background is here.
It is very easy to see, Brian, why she was chosen by the Nobel Committee. This is a woman who has dedicated her life to her country, Venezuela, which is, of course, now suffered under an economic crisis, under what is widely seen as a dictatorship, under increasing repression. And she has faced off with those authorities both boldly, bravely, and unbowingly. Just to go over a little bit of who she is, she was elected a member of the National Assembly in 2011. She held that seat for nearly 3 years and was eventually stripped of that seat. She tried to run for presidential elections and was also removed from the ballot, and that's not due to her popularity. Brian, there is an understanding that she has deep popularity on the ground and a huge movement behind her. About a year ago, she went into hiding, fearing for her life. We understand she remains in hiding. She recently did an interview with Elle magazine, speaking of that experience, saying that she's barely seen the sun in months, but that she continues to fight for what she believes in. And that is fundamentally, at its core, a peaceful transition to democracy for a country, again, that has suffered deeply under dictatorship. So, again, she is someone who very much embodies that sense of spirit of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, which is one that is unbending, unbowing to greater powers. Again, the power and brute of the state force of Nicolas Maduro. Someone who has not given up time and time again, despite facing accusations of treason, despite being physically harassed and assaulted, despite the power of Venezuela's government coming down on her. She has continued, again, her fight for democracy in her country. She is also a mother, an engineer by training, someone who has really been able to build roots and build a community and dig deep into Venezuela. So by awarding this prize, it's not only recognizing her work, Brian, it's a recognition of everything that's happening on the ground in Venezuela, but also of the larger context here. Dictatorships are on the rise. Autocracies are on the rise. That is the trend globally. So it is a recognition, again, of all of those who are fighting against repression, fighting against autocracy. So this will be a major win. And I know our news desk right now is working to find out reaction on the ground and to find out specifically her reaction as she remains in hiding from a government as far as we know, while she continues that battle face to face.
All right, Selma Abdelaziz for us live in London. Selma, thank you. Let's go now to get more information on this from defense analyst Alex Alvarez-Shears. He joins me from London. And Alex, if you can, walk us through why it's Maria Corina Machado receiving this award this year out of the 300 plus nominees.
I think one of the main reasons why it's been Machado is because she has demonstrated what it takes to actually try and push the dial for peace, to represent the very best angels in our nature. Whilst we've been overshadowed, this particular cycle has been overshadowed by all sorts of controversies. She has shown that if you want to push for peace, you have to make sacrifices, you have to be selfless yourself, and you have to focus on altruism in the face of all the adversity that comes with that. What's happened in Venezuela over the years is no secret. We all know about the tyranny that the Venezuelan people have been under, but she is a beacon of light in a world that is becoming increasingly beset by authoritarian trends and authoritarian streak. And I think this particular recipient, this particular award is one for unity, one for collective action, and one for global democracy.
Alex, I think we should note that the winner this year was not U.S. President Donald Trump, despite a campaign to become the recipient. And the Norwegian Committee Council leader, you really used democracy as a point to be made over and over again in his speech giving the award, saying at a time when democracy is under threat, it is more important than ever to defend this common ground. Can you just contextualize for us his speech, what this means for maybe future recipients and maybe just the world view as a whole at the moment?
Well, the key thing that came from that speech, I thought, was tools of democracy are the tools for peace. This is absolutely critical. Democracy is inclusive. It is there to bring people together. It is there to unite people. And what we've seen from Washington under this administration is the very opposite. We've seen a lot of belittling, a lot of berating, a lot of bullying by this administration. Whilst we could point to some of the positive things that are happening in the Middle East at the very minute, what the Trump administration has also done is try to use force to justify things like annexing territory that belong to allies, trying to flirt with the idea of annexing the neighbor north of the United States in Canada. This sort of language is not constructive to peace. It is not constructive to unity going forward. And I think the speech that was made was to highlight, to emphasize the point that ultimately, if you want peace, you have to have the right intentions, and you have to embody the spirit and the ethos of peace, which is something that unfortunately the Trump administration simply has not done. And again, this is to encourage future generations of activists, of leadership, of thought leaders, of politicians, to bring people together under the banner of peace, under the banner of democracy, to do good for all mankind, or as Alfred Nobel himself said, to create a fraternity of nations.
Yeah. All right, Alex Alfaraz-Shears, really appreciate you providing us some insight into this monumental moment here. I do want to go now to Isa Suarez, who's joining us. She, my colleague here, actually interviewed Maria Machado. And Isa, kind of just walk us through what your experience was talking with her and what you took away from it.
Good morning, Brian. Well, what a moment for Maria Corina Machado, but also what a moment for Venezuelans who have for so long been fighting this fight for freedom, of course. She is very well known in Venezuela and beyond, in the Americas as well. I mean, she is known, Brian, as the Venezuelan Iron Lady, and she personifies in this fight that she's been fighting for so long. And I've known her even before she's taken on this charge, of course, of fighting for freedom. And she's shown throughout just resilience, Brian, just tenacity throughout, and she's faced huge challenges, and I think it's worth bearing in mind for people who do not know. She's still in hiding, right? She's still in hiding. We assume in Venezuela, and of course stand up to Nicolas Maduro, who lost the election of July 28 by more than 2-1 margin, although he never gave. And she stood there and she continues to fight in hiding, away from her family, putting sacrifices on the line for the people of Venezuela. So this moment will be huge, not just for her and her team, but also for Venezuelans, millions who have fled, of course, under Maduro's regime. And while President Trump may not have won here, Brian, this will no doubt be welcome news, I'm sure, by the Trump administration, who have been fighting in the last couple of weeks, you'd have seen, putting pressure on the Maduro regime, going after the Cartel de los Soles, and this will play very well within their foreign policy.
Isa, I know that you've kind of followed these moments and these individuals that stand up to repressive governments. She wasn't the only one in the running here. You have Yulia Navalnaya, Alexei Navalny's widow, as well. When you compare the two, because there seems to be some mutual situations here, what makes her, Maria, stand out above Yulia?
Maria was and has been throughout, she's a veteran diplomat. She just didn't appear overnight, right? She's been doing this for many, many years, often behind the scenes, often in the sidelines. But she's really taken on the fight, facing Maduro quite openly on the streets of Caracas, and being very forceful, not lying down, not taking any of the criticism. And, she has been forced into exile because of this prosecution, and she continues, Brian, I think this is important, to do interviews. I spoke to her at the beginning of January, and I remember having this conversation with her where I said to her, aren't you scared of being arrested? Aren't you scared that you're going to be arrested by Nicolas Maduro? And she said, well, Isa, we'll take it one day at a time. And I know she's been far away from her daughter. Her daughter's often been the one receiving the prizes in her honor. But she's really been facing the anti-Chavista forces for a very long time. And this is something that she has said. Her language has strengthened over the last few weeks as we've seen the United States apply pressure on Venezuela, on Cartel de los Soles. And she said, sooner or later, Maduro will go. I have no doubt, Brian, this will be a tough pill to swallow for Maduro, an important lesson, but this is her fight for democracy in Venezuela, a fight that she has been fighting and enduring for so long, and a fight that I have no doubt many Venezuelans, not just inside the country, but the millions who have fled, the millions outside, and many in the United States, will also be flying their banner today in honor of their country and of Maria Corina Machado.
And I get a sneaky feeling, Issa, that you may be speaking with her sooner than later, given your history with Maria.
Here's hoping, Brian.
Right.
Here's hoping.
Appreciate you. Thank you.